Next discussion, the big leap over fossil fuels, renewables in the developing world. The panel's moderator is Tom King, a man involved in many things, but here he's to talk about Puerto Rico and his new foundation, Fundación Borincana. Be joined by Luca Poanga of the Energy Africa Conference, Colonel William Wyatt of the U.S. Army, and returning to our day, Stephen Conger of P4P. Tom?
Okay, am I live? Can everybody hear me? That's the next. Oh, hang on, there we go. I can hear it. Thanks. So our clock is running, so I'm going to get going while we get everyone else wired up. Good morning. My name is Tom King, and I'm the founding director of the Fundación Borincana. It's a nonprofit that formed last year to focus on accelerating the energy transformation of Puerto Rico. I'm also a member of the board of the American Renewable Energy Institute and the moderator of this panel today, Big Leap Over Fossil Fuels, Renewables in the Developing World. I'm joined by three very distinguished subject matter experts, Stephen Conger, Luca Poanga, and Chris Wyatt. Now, we could do 2 hours on this subject, but we have 30 minutes, actually 29 and 11 seconds. So I hope everyone has been able to skim the information that Tatiana very kindly sent out. If not, you'll hear it and you'll have it. We're not going to do any personal extended intros. We're each going to give about a 5 or 6 minute talk on our experience and the activities that we're involved in, tying it into the theme of the panel. And at the end, to round it out, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to basically add their thoughts on the conversation and what they've just heard from each other. We're not going to take questions, but we've all agreed that we're going to meet outside for an hour from 2 to 3 o'clock this afternoon. So any pressing questions, interests, information, please come and meet us there, or of course, grab us in the hallway. So just quickly, the Fundación Borincana, as I said, works to transform energy. The devastation wrought by the hurricanes in Puerto Rico and the failure of the utility, the bankruptcy of the country have all paradoxically created an environment where you can actually do this sort of sustainable, unparalleled opportunity, build back a first of its kind modern system. Puerto Rico, in the theme of this particular conversation, is the redeveloping world. It is a first world design system with several failures, with the obstacles now knocked down. It's making similar leaps toward low carbon, 100% renewable and sustainable infrastructure. The path to sustainable low carbon future runs through Puerto Rico. This is certainly true of Puerto Rico, but for the developing world, it is going to be a model and a sandbox for the future. Clean, sustainable energy technologies, business practices, financial innovation, dynamic regulatory structure, and of course political will are all going to be tested and refined to create this modern system of a distributed grid and energy infrastructure of the future. With this new energy policy passed this year, Puerto Rico is going to be the first in the world to manage the complete transformation from a traditional vertical central generation model to a distributed prosumer model, facilitating the successful recovery and transformation and lifting millions out of poverty. Puerto Rico has the privilege and the responsibility to rewrite the utility system handbook for the 21st century. Lessons taken from Puerto Rico will inform new technologies and practices and will be applied in the transformation of core infrastructure worldwide for decades, particularly first world design systems. Places like Hawaii and California, other states are currently in the lead, well in the lead, but they won't be for that long. The biggest obstructions in Puerto Rico have been knocked down. What you see in trying to effect transformation in other first world systems are that you have incumbents, utilities, politicians, customers, regulators, all working against or slowing down the transformation. It isn't broke, so we don't need to break it to fix it. In Puerto Rico, they don't have that option. Everything is pulling in the other direction. The key challenges that remain are addressable. Unlike pretty much everywhere else, the consistent access to financing in Puerto Rico is the key obstacle to radically accelerating the scaling, the growth of distributed systems. So quickly, the Fundación Borincana was formed to support and accelerate the energy transformation. And we do so through an approach that's a term impact philanthropy. We advocate for strong, transparent policies and undertaking individual, institutional, and structural development that the government and the private sector either are unwilling or unable to address. We act as a responsible partner for government, and we look to lower the participation risk of the private sector. We're looking to crowd in investment and crowd in participation into the developing market. We're doing large things and small with a focus on impact. We try to see the whole puzzle, right? Not focus on one piece of the puzzle, or look at one area at a time. If you want to accelerate a solution in transform markets, you have to be able to take a holistic approach, creating solutions that are replicable, scalable, and sustainable. Now, we've got no time for real details here, so I'm happy and invite people to talk to me. But some of the things that we're working on are regulatory policy, providing information, because it's a big transformation. There's a lot of regulatory stuff that's going to be developed, and this is the first market to do so. We're holding a webinar on that next week and doing things consistently. We're advising the first electric cooperative to be formed in Puerto Rico. We run workshops. We help companies and community groups access capital for energy projects. So I wanted to highlight something. This is not, strictly speaking, a program of the nonprofit, but I'm working with a small group to develop a truly first distributed utility in Puerto Rico. This is something that can actually now be done with the regulation and the policy changes in Puerto Rico. The first market where I can say this can actually happen. There is no effective incumbent obstruction as a system to do this. The path is wide open for the creation of a utility that operates generation and storage assets behind the meter and serves distribution locally and regionally, fortifying the grid, but does not operate it. The entire population is sold on distributed generation, but for a various number of reasons, the island-wide demand remains unmet and unsatisfiable so far. Energía Boricua, which is this effort, is looking to take advantage of the most advanced energy policy in the world, actively participate in the formation of the regulation that drives the market, lead the energy transformation of Puerto Rico, and grow to a billion-dollar company. Interestingly, and I don't know if anybody else is going to specifically address it, but the types of things that you can do in Puerto Rico in terms of creating value stacking for a utility enterprise, these are things that we talk about doing in Uganda and Nigeria and elsewhere, not in first world systems. These opportunities are open to companies like Energía Boricua. Very happy to talk about this later. I would also, just a quick shout out since I'm up here, to the gentleman from Hero. We should really look at acquiring one or more of the oil-fired stations in Puerto Rico that are going to be privatized and see if there's an application there, because we might be able to pick them up for $1. So, last one. So, we are very proud to have AREI as a fiscal sponsor, providing us with the opportunity to accept tax-deductible donations. And I want to thank Chip and the team personally for adopting us as we get rolling. We need to do more. We're at that stage where we need to move from mostly volunteer startup mode toward having a more stable base. And of course, I'm looking directly at impact investors and climate philanthropists. And I'd say this: do not overlook Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is important and can be a shining star and a leading example. Also, I would just point out, I think everyone who is here has a vested interest in seeing this effort go forward and support it. And so while I'm here, I have to actually make the ask. I'll just point out the price that we're paying for a room here, with the $250, we could do a lot. We can subsidize the cost to bring community groups and small companies in to help educate them on accessing capital and technical provisions for their projects. We can get a couple of hours of expert advice into key companies who are developing these projects. This is very important, and the opportunity to support. Love for everyone to participate. As an added incentive and to encourage people here to participate, I will match any dollar that anybody donates from this group up to an aggregate amount of $20,000. So kind of double the benefit. I mean, I'm already in for a sheep. Might as well be in for a lamb. There's two ways you can do this, and I'll be switching off here and passing the button here in a second. Because we're fiscally sponsored. You can actually go directly to the AREI website, the payments portal. If you may have noticed when you're registering down the bottom, it said Fundación Borincana. You probably wondered what that was. That's us. That's a payment portal to make the contribution. You can also go to our website and click through, and you'll eventually get back to that same page. I just want you to go to our website. So, anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll obviously be outside, and I think I'm going to hand over to Luca and allow you to talk now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Luca Powang. I'm the host of the Energy Africa Conference, apart from being a professor at Regis University. The main purpose of the Energy Africa Conference is to bring together top government officials, business executives, and technical people from Africa, bring them over to the US, where they can meet with their counterparts and start talking about how can Africa develop an energy infrastructure that is accessible, that is appropriate, and that is cost-effective. Now, behind that is not just the talking. We would like, after we have had those conversations, for us to get together and form partnerships so that we can actualize projects in Africa. And so the most important part of what we do, apart from the conference itself, is actually going out there in Africa and identify specific projects that we can bring American companies to actualize. So what we do is we have formed partnerships all across Africa. Most of those people have either been business executives, or they've been top government officials, or they've been at institutions of higher learning, so they understand how the systems actually run in Africa. And once they give us the project, these are the people who actually find the project, or they come up with concepts on what we need to do. And then we come out here and look at the people that are in the network. And this network consists of funders, professionals, project developers, and all kinds of people. And once we circulate that project, those who are interested, then they participate in that project. Now, the main reason why we do that is we want to make sure that we move from the point of just discussions to the point of actually acting. Now, what does acting mean? It means that we want to have an infrastructure that is clean. And Africa presents a very good prototype, if you will, because there the infrastructure is still in its infant stage. So you don't have all these fightings that you get, for instance, in the US, where people are already dagging because you are now trying to take lunch from them. So they are fighting hard to make sure that they keep that infrastructure. But in this case, we are starting from a clean slate. So this gives us a really good opportunity for us to do something that can be beneficial to the nation as well as to the rest of the world. Well, and by nation, I'm referring to Africa as a whole. And Africa, as you all may know, consists of 54 countries. So there are different policies and different problems that you are going to encounter. But if you take it as a whole, it's all underdeveloped, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And we have been hearing the number, 600 million people have no access to energy. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is also that particular number. Because if it has been 600 million people for the past 10 years, it means that there is some progress going on. And that's the progress that we would like to tap into. So now, if you look at some of the things that we do, we look at specific institutions, for instance, mining, we look at universities, we look at hospitals. The idea is to try and win them off the national grid. Because the national grid, most of the time, the electrical distribution is very erratic. Can you imagine at a hospital, you are on the operating table and electricity shuts off? And right now, if you look at most of these African countries, particularly from Ethiopia, all the way down to Zambia, they are all rationing. That's because they didn't rain as much as it should have, and they are all dependent on hydroelectric power. And what that means is now their capacity has actually fallen very low. And they don't have the necessary electricity that they need. So what we do is we go to this, let's say, mining company and say, hey, would you like to be independent? And the beauty about that is if they say yes, then we sign a power supply agreement with them, And what we do is we establish the infrastructure right from the word go, meaning right from carrying out feasibility studies, going into the development, going into the funding, and all the way to commissioning and operating. So they don't invest anything, we do the investments ourselves. And that investment comes from the network that we already have. So what does that do for that company? One is they don't have to worry about capital expenditure because we are doing it. Their operating costs go down because they may have been getting electricity at 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Now they can get it at 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which means now they don't have to worry about capital costs. Operating costs, they've come down. And also they have a steady supply of electricity for at least the life of the power supply agreement. So in that sense, we reduce the cost and we make more power available because now the grid has got the opportunity to feed what they would have fed to this particular power company, this particular mining company, now they can feed it to somebody else. Obviously, the time is not on my side. As my colleague here said, we are going to have some time where you can come and visit with us. So I would like to pass on to my colleague here, Chris.
All right, thanks a lot, Luca. Appreciate it. So in the interest of full disclosure, I wasn't planning on showing my slides, so where's the first button to advance this thing?
Just a green button there.
Just the green button. Well, that makes it simple. There, oh, too far. I'll go back now. There we go. So that's probably the prettiest slide I have there. A couple spelling errors and typos because these were for me to read off of, just to check my notes. But I'll correct these and make them available to folks. So much like Nora Ephron's movie, You've Got Mail, Parker Posey's character made coffee nervous. I do the same. My high-energy guy, I only have a couple minutes, so I'll zip through this pretty quickly. Unlike a lot of folks speaking to you this week, I'm not up here to talk about new technology. Despite my best efforts, I haven't created cold fusion in my garage. I've been trying very hard. Hasn't worked out too well. So I'm also not up here to drum up business. What I'm hoping to do is, for those who are unaware of it, open some eyes up to the El Dorado of the 21st century. Africa is a place that definitely needs a lot of attention when it comes to energy, and it is a major reason why the continent's economic development is retarded. So we need safe, reliable, stable electricity, something that, as Luca mentioned a moment ago, over 643 million Africans currently do not have access to. Having lived in rural Appalachia for part of my high school years without electricity, I can personally attest to what it's like not having electricity. For those who have it and have it every day and see the effects of it, you take it for granted. But when you don't have electricity, you can't refrigerate medicines, you can't take care of vaccines, you can't provide electricity for operating tables in the crunch. And there's many other aspects of this. Folks in Africa who don't have access to reliable electricity doing severe environmental degradation. So we see in Somalia vast stretches of trees destroyed to create charcoal, and that trade is cornered by Al-Shabaab, which fuels terrorism and funds that. Just one example. Between Malawi and Tanzania, Lake Malawi, or Lake Nyasa, depending which side you're talking to. But Lake Malawi, a lot of the tropical fish beds have been greatly damaged because of deforestation to create charcoal. And then, of course, people use this for heating and cooking, and so there's air pollutants, and we have millions of Africans who have lung disease and ailments that are a result of not having access to reliable energy. Electricity would solve that. So these are issues about electricity. I'm not sure what the population in Africa was in the year 2019. It was probably about 30,000. It's supposed to be 2019. But today in Africa, there's 1.3 billion people. No matter what happens with population growth, population control, by the year 2050, there'll be 2.3 to 2.5 billion people living in Africa. If you want to prevent carbon from getting into the atmosphere, this is where people really need to take a hard look at. That's Africa. Because electricity is going to come to Africa, whether it's going to be hydrocarbons or it's going to be hydroelectric, it's going to be some sort of renewable. Electricity is going to come there. Power is going to come to Africa in one way or another. Otherwise, all the Africans are going to leave Africa because they're not going to sit there forever. Infrastructure in Africa is woefully inadequate. That's one of the challenges for investors. But this is where the future will be for investing. The next consumer class in Africa today, people's disposable income, probably about 280, 300 million Africans, perhaps. Not as much disposable income as Europeans or Japanese or Americans, but nonetheless a consumer class. By the year 2050, that number is going to be about 900 million consumers in Africa, at least. And these are people who will be paying for electricity. Something to take a look at. So what's going on today? What's happening today is that there are efforts on the ground in Africa, but they pale in comparison to the rest of the world. So China's a big actor. European Union countries and the United States are all active. You can't open up a news story about Africa and not find something about renewable energy projects. That said, everyone seems to think that everything being done in Africa is done by China. China promised to produce half their infrastructure, power generation projects to be renewables by this year already. About 7% of those projects are actually renewable. And a lot of that's hydro. And of course, there are consequences of hydroelectric power that aren't always pleasant. But the storyline is that China is not the major player here. Everyone's involved, and there's lots of opportunities for everybody to get involved here. Let's see what else, since we're running short on time. The bottom line with electricity is that Africans need it, and they're going to get it. And I don't think a lot of Africans that I know, I've lived all over the continent in 8 different countries and worked in over 40 of them, they're not really concerned whether it comes from a coal-fired power plant or it comes from solar photovoltaic, or it's solar thermal, or it's wave power, whatever it is, or hydrogen. The reality is this is a burgeoning marketplace, and it's a place that's neglected. As Luca alluded to a moment ago, this is a place where we can leapfrog, just like mobile telephony did in Africa. It went right past landlines, which slowed growth in Africa for decades because it wasn't installed. Same thing's happening with energy today. If we can leapfrog with off-grid or microgrids or even hooking into the grid with renewable energy, it's going to make a big, big impact. So I'm not going to go into this because I'm really short on time here. But the bottom line is that why aren't people looking at Africa? Well, because a lot of people neglect Africa. It's not intentional. It's not an oversight. It's not malicious on the part of most folks. But it's just a place that's alien to most folks that are outside of Africa. Asians, Europeans, Americans, Latin Americans. Africa is a strange place they're not familiar with. 54 different markets is how people see it. Lack of regional integration. But a lot of that's changing. And a lot of the conditions in Africa are currently changing from what they've been in the past. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which has currently been ratified and going into effect, is the big hope for a lot of Africans, but it does have a lot of challenges. I'm the kind of guy that will tell you the truth, but I'm going to tell you the shortcomings up front. I'm going to be honest with you about that. I don't have time for that today. I can talk to you offline, but Africa is a great opportunity, but there are challenges. I've categorized these as the C cube, and that is corruption, crime, and chaos. Yes, they all exist. They're all challenges for investors, but the situation in all 3 of those things has improved dramatically across the continent in the last 2 decades. Infrastructure is a challenge, of course. Governance is improving, but there is backsliding. 3 of the countries I mentioned up there have seen a fallback in quality of governance in the last 10 years. So why Africa? Well, I'm an American, and I'm proud to be American. I've lived in a dozen countries. I've been to about 6 dozen countries around the world, and in my view, this is the best place in the world. And if that offends people, I don't mean to. I'm just saying that's why I'm up here speaking, because I believe that Africans can profit from American business investing in the energy sector in Africa. It's a great need. You can do something wonderful for Africans and make a profit, and both sides benefit from it. African needs are a great business opportunity. Someone's going to do it. Is it going to be China? Is it going to be the European Union countries? Is it going to be the United States? It could be all of us, but we should get into it. If the United States does not take Africa seriously in the next 10 to 15 years, far more seriously than we've looked at it the last 50 years, we will become a second-rate economic and global power by the year 2050. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people on this planet will be living in Africa by that time. So, sir, I'll pass to you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Stephen Conger from P4P Energy. I'm going to go really quickly here so that we have a little time to reflect on each other's talks. This is a system that we built over a canal in Punjab. We built 1.6 miles of this in 10 weeks. It's a 5-megawatt system, and it's a cable-based structure. We don't typically talk about our technology as the leap over fossil fuels, but given the context of this talk, I reflected on that a little bit. Leapfrogging is a situation where users of a vintage form of technology skip the current dominant form of that technology with its excessive investment requirements and go directly to its modern form. The drivers of this leapfrogging are, especially in Africa, which we're talking about right now, is excess demand in terms of growing population and urbanization, the problems with climate change, the requirements that we need to solve that are energy resources that can be tapped. We need innovation and technologies that can utilize those resources and lower the price, and then we need financing. P4P Energy's multiple benefit systems facilitate the innovation, price, the energy resource, and climate change leapfrogging drivers in unmet electricity markets. Our technology is fundamentally simple. We manufacture lightweight, cost-efficient cable structures and we have material and labor advantages that support scaling at a rapid rate, and this is starting to show up in reality. Our fundamental technology is we have solar panels on space frame pods that give them rigidity and protect the panels. We hang them from various cable truss formations, and you can see on the bottom there what an over-canal system looks like. That's a 165-foot span, and we're looking at a 100-megawatt project in the Gujarat right now, and we don't think there's any other system that can compete with us in spans like that. We also have a ground mount. We're signing a contract with Ganges International to do our international manufacturing. They do $100 million a month of ground mount, and they're looking at moving the bulk of their ground mount systems to our system. We've just finished a pilot project with them. Our system is fundamentally simple. You can see on the bottom where the cables are supported by columns, and then we hang panels on those and wire those. Ganges International alone is expecting to do 300 megawatts a year of our system in 2 years. Getting a little bit further ahead of where we are right now, we are developing over agriculture systems and a community support security systems. We've designed microgrid systems that can efficiently provide for the basic needs of a community, including electricity, reduced water for food production, and the possibility of protection from insects, birds, desertification, storms, and if necessary, you can harden the exterior and protect from people. We've also, on a larger scale, done a report for Renaissance Corporation of Oman, which builds cities of 6,000 from scratch. They hired us to look at what we could do to provide the energy support for a system like that, and we're talking to them about realizing this. One of the advantages of our system is that we actually can shade all the buildings, which reduces the energy load substantially. We can shade outdoor spaces in an area that now is approaching 150 degrees, sometimes in the summer. The results of this study showed that we could provide for all the power generation needs for the residential, for the transportation, and for the food growing and other systems for this city of Oman. So that's really blasted through so that we could go very quickly, and we are one of a lot of systems that are going to be necessary for this transformation. And with that, I think I'll stop and have time for our questions.
Yeah.
For each other.
No, maybe I'll just ask Luca. I mean, we've obviously sat here and had listened to what all we're saying. Any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are, in terms of joining our network, Africa is ready for investment. And as Chris pointed out, he's known as William. As William pointed out, Africa is ready for these kinds of investments for American companies. And Africa loves American companies because when they get in there, they train the people and they transfer the technology, as opposed to some other countries where they go in with their own workers. So if you have the opportunity to speak with me, or you can get the information from anybody who is concerned with this conference, get in contact with us and we'll be able to provide some of those opportunities to you.
Chris?
Yes, thank you. Chip and team, appreciate the opportunity to come and speak and the invitation. Folks, seriously, I'm not kidding. Africa is the new El Dorado. It is the great opportunity. And those who sit on the sidelines and watch it are going to miss a great opportunity. And not only us will benefit, those who are trying to invest in Africa, but also Africans. So I offer that up to you. Lots of challenges, but they're not insurmountable, and it is the place to go in the future for growth.
Africa is one of the main goals for our company and has been from the very beginning. I first went to Africa when I was 18. I worked for the Lagos City Council Health Department, and I've loved Africa ever since. So one of my goals is to get back there with these systems. We're talking to somebody in Tanzania right now about putting systems in. So our move to Africa is something that I'm really looking forward to. So.
Gets under your fingernails, doesn't it?
It does, it never gets out of your blood once you're there.
It's vast and very different and beautiful.
Yeah.
So last word again, thanking everybody. I too have spent a little time in Africa, and I've worked with different groups who are looking at doing things in Uganda, extending out the microgrids at the edge of the grid. It's kind of like that leading. It's the pull system of development. And then, I guess, not necessarily eternal shame, but I worked in Ghana in the 90s with a large bank working on a large gas-fired power stations back then. So that was pre my conversion. But, thank you very much, and we're out of time. We're pretty much on time, so thanks a lot.